Thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure, and I'm really glad I'm coming up last, because I think hopefully some of what I say will feed into all of the different presentations we've given today. So I am Chair of Food Marketing Society at Edinburgh, and have had a long sort of career on the interface between food policy and behaviour, really, and understanding why people do what they do with food, and in particular the sort of less than ideal behaviours around food, or behaviours that we may be interested in intervening with and changing. Since moving to Edinburgh about 10 years ago, I've found it an incredibly dynamic and I suppose really engaging policy space as well to be in, and that has been really fueled by my involvement with the Scottish Food Coalition, who I will briefly introduce, and then and sort of sets the scene for a lot of where we've gone to from then. So the Scottish Food Coalition is a coalition of around 50 civil society organisations who came together in about 2016, all who have an interest in and have been campaigning and advocating for a fairer, healthier and more sustainable food system for Scotland. As you can see, there's a range of organisations, from some of our very large workers' unions, large environmental charities, smaller public health and other charities, and then right down to local charities. Very driven by the sort of power and passion of Pete Ritchie, who runs Nourish Scotland, a sort of organisation that has been at the heart of what it does, is advocating for a fairer and juster food system. And I have learned so much from being both a member and chair since 2018 of the coalition about what is possible, what we can learn through thinking and working and debating and fighting together, how we can learn about the tensions within the system and between different players and stakeholders, and power systems within that. And the biggest thing that we've learned, and we've just recently completed a piece of work that really has brought our collective voice together, and I'll highlight it in a little bit, is about how we can learn what we can all live with, and how we can give and take, how we can make sense of the tensions, how we can hold the complexity. So the work that Jamie was talking about in terms of systems thinking, there isn't a solution sometimes. The solution is to live with the uncertainty and to live with the complexity and learn what the best options are that deliver those co-benefits. I think at the heart of it as well is learning about how do we deliver and make sense of multiple outcomes, and how we can work much more collaboratively together to achieve those multiple benefits. So this is the work that we've recently published, and I suppose it's to highlight that what the coalition has brought to life for me and for many others is that we all have our areas of interest and we all have our areas of expertise, but none of us have all of the answers, and none of us have all of the levers, and none of us have all of the resources, and none of us have all of the energy. But it's the alchemy about bringing those resources and expertise and energy together to be able to negotiate the spaces between our areas of interest, the spaces between economic, social, health and environmental outcomes. That is where the real magic can happen. And at the heart of that is some of the ambitions around a good food nation for Scotland. And we talk about food not to the exclusion of other aspects, and transport, as has just been highlighted, transport is as important to food access as other elements. So it's recognising that these cross-cutting themes, and these are the ones that have come out of the state-of-the-art literature, and through detailed evidence gathering from our coalition members. These are the sort of core pillars, I suppose, upon which we believe a good food nation for Scotland needs to be built. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Good Food Nation Act as we go in, because there's been a lot happening in the last 12 months. I went on sabbatical expecting that I would have a little bit of a break. I didn't. Marie Goujon announced in October 2021 about 3 weeks into my sabbatical, and launched the new bill, introduced it to Parliament, and it has now gone through all its stages. And the Good Food Nation Act became Scots law on the 22nd or 26th of July, 2022. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is the sort of cornerstone of how Scotland is certainly has the ambition and the desire, and hopefully some of the levers, to take a more systemic approach to driving a fairer, healthier, more sustainable food system for Scotland. And many of the speakers have talked already about this, and I wanted to pick up on this issue that you don't get one over the other. One isn't more important than the other. Social justice is inextricably linked to better environmental outcomes, better health outcomes, and better economic outcomes. So it's not about either or, and it's not about prioritizing one over the other. And I think there is a danger at times when we set very ambitious policy goals that everything becomes focused on net zero, or everything becomes focused on certain aspects to the exclusion, or us turning our head away from what does equitable, fair transport look in a net zero future. So I think it's trying to hold in tension and in balance the different outcomes that we're trying to achieve and the challenges of achieving those. And also within that, and it hasn't necessarily come out yet today, but it's not only about people. It's also about animals and fish and our land and our soil and our water, as much as it is about people. But of course, we are very important within that. So it is a complex balancing act, and there are tensions and issues and challenges within that, and there are often difficult trade-offs to make. And part of what I think I've really appreciated through the depth of interaction through the Scottish Food Coalition is about how do you negotiate and make sense of, and at least face up to those trade-offs, and learn where you might be unintendedly bedding in inequities and inequalities. So it's been quite a long and winding road, and I've added in just some of the legislation around climate change and where that is weaving in, and there's no doubt that the Climate Change Emissions Reduction Target Scotland Act of 2019 has dominated a lot of the policy environment, a lot of the activity at local authority, and in my own broader work around school food is actually often on a day-to-day basis coming right up in tension with what you might be trying to achieve through school food, socially, economically, and from a health perspective, and can be a real site of disagreement at times, despite, as has just been said, there being quite broad consensus about the direction of travel. But how does that play itself out in a school kitchen? How does that play itself out at a local authority that is having to make trade-offs and decisions about what they prioritise and what they don't prioritise? And I think, this is arguably similar to the climate change, but arguably one of the most transformative pieces of food legislation globally. This has been identified by the UN Special Rapporteur for the Right to Food, Michael Faraki, as a real symbol of the progress and progressive nature of Scottish food policy. And it is about to formally commence its processes in early 2023. What it now requires is that it is no longer at the whim of a Scottish Cabinet Secretary as to whether we have a food plan in this country or whether we have food plans at local authority level. It is now a legislative requirement for us to have a national food plan, for us to monitor and evaluate progress towards that national food plan independently through a new Scottish Food Commission that will hopefully be launched by September 2024, and for our local authorities to be working together independently and together to deliver the outcomes at a local level. So there is clear recognition that how we deliver outcomes needs to be sensitised and appropriate for communities and local authorities. But there needs to be a common direction of travel in terms of what we see as as progress towards a fairer, more healthier and sustainable food system. Just as a note in that, for example, in the high-level outcomes that need to be built into the Good Food Nation Act and the associated plans and work of the Commission is child poverty, for example, is animal welfare, is issues around food insecurity. So there are some core areas that will be built into the high-level outcomes which are currently being drafted by the civil service teams involved. There's also, interestingly, and it is painstaking, but it is happening, and the green shoots are definitely emerging of the recognition and the sort of, that they must break down silos. So going back to my pillars, we must break down silos within the Scottish Government, within local authorities, and within our own professional areas of activity if we are going to deliver those multiple benefits. Just as a snapshot, right to food has not been enacted in the Good Food Nation Act. It is coming through the Human Rights Bill, she says, with her fingers crossed. But there is strong language around the need to ensure adequate food. It has been designed to drive improvements in health and well-being, environmental, social and economic outcomes, and very much built around, at this stage, around how local authorities and how Scotland does public food. So it is not placing explicit requirements on private industry and the food and drink sector, food and drink industry, though it will implicitly affect those who serve and supply public food. But it is trying us to really reset our mindset around how important the investment being made in public food is to delivering environmental, health, social and economic outcomes. There's a responsibility placed on relative authorities, and that includes health boards. So all of the health boards, as well as the 47 plans, will need to be produced. And so there will be an awful lot of challenge around coordination and collaboration and monitoring and evaluating that will be worked through. It has at its heart a systems-orientated vision that drives stronger policy coherence, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And it came very last minute. I was on a cycling holiday in Ireland when I finally heard it had been approved, but there will be, and apparently the finances have been ring-fenced, an independent Scottish Food Commission that will be responsible for scrutiny, reporting, recommendations and advice around, and will have formal rights to be able to challenge and to make recommendations to ministers and to the Scottish Government and to local authorities and health boards. Just to give a sense, this is very quickly, I won't spend much time on this, but part of the madness of these sort of areas and part of the madness of systems thinking is trying to be on top of all of the different policy levers and legislation and measures and initiatives that might be impacting or impacted by other pieces of legislation. And this is just an example, a snapshot from the 22-23 programme for government. We have a National Care Service Bill that is due to be introduced, a forthcoming Circular Economy Bill, forthcoming Land Reform Bill, an Agriculture Bill, which will fundamentally influence the way in which we produce food, which is central to everything that we think about in terms of a good food nation. The introduction of new public health bill around the restrictions on promotion, the human rights bill I mentioned, public consultations on new legislation around community wealth building. We talked about land, we talked about access to green spaces, we talked about renegotiating the environments in which we live in, the delayed rollout of universal free school meals, but I absolutely, building what Anna was saying and others we were talking in the break around, we have to continue the campaigning around the importance for second level universal provision and potentially into third level universal provision, so that we are ensuring that children and young adults are not falling off a cliff into really serious food insecurity. The establishment of a new food security unit and an update of the Catering for Change. That's just an example of what we're trying to hold and make sense of, and there is others. So I did take matters into my own hands and decided I was getting out of Edinburgh during my sabbatical. I used the Scottish Food Coalition as my cover, and they sent me on tour around Scotland on cars, buses, ferries, a few little Logan Air flights to islands. But I just wanted to bring a feel for how the Good Food Nation Act and its ambitions around, in particular, environmental outcomes and the relationship to climate change, how it is playing itself out through innovative, collaborative, brave and courageous initiatives and ideas that are coming to the fore through local authorities around the country. This is Woodside Farm in North Ayrshire on the beautiful island of Arran. And this farm provides eggs and vegetables for all of the schools on Arran. It has a specific tender. They have a sort of dedicated contract. This was supported and negotiated in collaboration with Soil Association Scotland as part of their Food for Life. And this is driving development and innovation and growth in this farm, which has a very sort of community-orientated focus, but is also providing some of the highest quality food, and in particular eggs, pasture-fed eggs. This is the hens outside. They move around every day, so you move them around. And it's just a really interesting example of what can be done if you think about what you're trying to achieve environmentally, socially, economically, and from a public health perspective, and how you get those pounds working harder for you, how you get them generating more value in the community. This is another example from Woodside, and I just wanted to highlight this one because some of it is low-tech solutions. This is a Keter house. They are the most amazing facilities that can be used in community gardens, in school gardens, in farms. They can withstand 140 mile an hour winds. They will survive in Shetland, no problem. But these provide all year-round facilities to be able to produce the salad crops, the quick-growing vegetables that are really what schools want and need. So it's about trying to think creatively about how we invest, some of which is relatively low cost, thinking at a sort of higher level. But these organisations, these farms, these enterprises are thwarted by grant bureaucracy. The requirement for match funding, which is incredibly difficult for them to raise. Lack of materials and contractors, especially on our islands and in our rural areas, and in housing for workers and access to land. Here is Shetland, and I'm nearly done. Here is Shetland, and this just gives you an example. Now, Shetland and Orkney, I'm just going to give you two examples. They have had to be more creative. They have had to think about what is the trade-off between local procurement and off-island procurement, and the balance between the risk and delivery of supply. They also, I think there is a stronger sense of the social contract between the local authorities in these island communities and their communities and the businesses that are central to those. And when you speak to people on the islands, almost all of them have some interaction with the local authority, either that they have a family member attending schools, or they're working for them, or they're supplying into them. So I think there's a real interesting sense of how the strength of these strengths of ties build up. And here's an example of there's four key suppliers who are central to school food provisioning on Shetland and who are helping to drive their local food procurement in a way that delivers really strong social, economic, environmental and public health benefits. What we haven't been good at, and at the heart of what I hope the Good Food Nation will offer, is we haven't been great at monitoring and evaluating these environmental, public health, social and economic benefits. We've been great at assessing how much school food costs, but we haven't been good at evaluating or monitoring the decisions that we make and how they can have both detrimental and positive benefits. And I think Shetland and Orkney are two examples of those in where you can help to drive economic growth, sustain local businesses, support environmentally friendly animal production in particular, and deliver really strong provision for kids in their regions. And I think I'm just about to run out of time, so I'm going to finish on that. It just gives you a feel for where Scotland is at, where its ambitions are, and the power and the value of bringing that civil society, local authorities, and central government and all other stakeholders in between together. And I think we have a huge opportunity with the Good Food Nation Act to drive and deliver the transformative change that has been so badly and so actively advocated for. Thank you.